All right. All be order. Roll call, please. Here.
And here, Councilmember Martinez. Councilmember Martinez, here. Councilmember Dominguez. Chair Garcia, here. Vice Chair Zavala, here. Commissioner Peters. Commissioner Gerardo, no, and Commissioner Zavala.
Ready? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. General review. And regional meeting was early with last one, but two things not so you do one at a time. Okay. There's a resolution of the council city of Springfield County voting delegates and Albany for the major cities following the end of the conference. I'm going, I'll be coming, you know about. All certainly.
What the people who are attending the League of California City Council. But I don't, I believe it's the 22nd and September.
Yeah.
The people attending is City Manager Wood, Mayor White, and Councilmember Martinez.
So I'll work on the primary. I know it's hard because people will be currently. You're not delegates. Maybe all of the other things we have as a United States training.
So actually driving. I know you are
Thank you. Presentation.
We good to go? Oh, different view. Yeah. Oh, maybe I need to. Sorry, I thought I was ready. Well, while they're getting started, let me introduce myself. I know some of you. I'm Mary Lerner. I'm a partner with Lozano Smith, and Jen and I are colleagues. And so I do still do work for the city of Greenfield. I used to be here quite often. And I'm here to help. We're co-presenting tonight. So I'll be doing the Brown Act part of this. And I'm getting a weird echo. Move over just a little bit. And let's see, I've been with Lozano Smith for about 9 years, been practicing for about 18 years, and I teach part-time at University of Phoenix. So I think this is probably my most favorite part of what I do, is getting to educate, collaborate, learn together. So I'm going to take the first half, and then Jen will take the second half, and she'll touch briefly on conflicts of interest, it's not the full AB 1, 2, 3, 4 training. That's a separate 2-hour training requirement in and of itself. So, but it is important to touch on it. I don't have too many regressions, I think, especially with the ever-changing laws. We good?
Yeah. There's a what bar there, but. That's okay. Yes, I am Jennifer Thompson. I am the city attorney. I have met most of you, or at least encountered you in meetings. So, and like Mary said, I'll be doing the kind of the later part of the presentation, not even the second half, kind of like the end bit. So
That feels pretty good.
yeah, it's primarily Brown Act.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so the first thing I just want to ask in general, when you're appointed or elected, you hear this concept of now you're subject to the Brown Act. What does that mean? What is the purpose of the Brown Act? What does that mean to you? And when I come up to it, I say, hey, now you're subject to the Brown Act. What are we doing?
You're following the laws
Okay.
regarding the Brown Act, and you're not supposed to have any meetings of a majority outside of the public eye, basically.
Right. And why is that?
Because it gives the public perception that I want to say insider trading, but that's not it. But backdoor deals are being made.
Secrets.
Yeah.
Things are happening in our community, right? We don't even know that. And so the whole idea about the Brown Act is for transparency. And everything should be out in the open unless there is a reason to go into closed session and have it be secret. At some point, and we'll get a little bit more into this, you always want to marry open with closed session at some point. So when we get to that part of this training, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. So that's the whole concept. If you're there, okay. That's the whole concept of the Brown Act. It's called the open meeting law. So sometimes it's uncomfortable to have to talk about certain things.
Very definitely.
Yeah, pretty uncomfortable. And in my experience, I've had commissioners or board members or council members ask me, is there any way we can get this in the closed session? Because it's sometimes uncomfortable, right? But those circumstances are very limited. And one thing that you can't do as your council is participate in a Brown Act violation. And so when we talk a little bit more about closed session, and we'll talk about how we as attorneys address that. But that's just the overview, and it is an open meeting law, been in place for many, many years, as you can see, since 1964. We also have this concept of this right to access of information concerning the conduct of the people's business. And one thing that we're not going to really go into tonight, but it is in line with access to the public, is the Public Records Act. And that is a very broad act. So high level, keep in mind that the things you put down in your official capacity, those are public records. Even if it's embarrassing, it's going to be a public record. I had one different city. I had one council member ask me, do I really have to disclose this? It was a text message from another mayor. I'm like, yeah, well, it's embarrassing. Then pick up the phone, have a conversation. But I think those are some hard lessons learned. But the whole idea, again, with these laws is that we're open to the public. And we want the public to participate. And we want the public to have the information that we have. Okay, so what does it require? What does the Brown Act require? It requires that we do things open and in public. It requires that all our meetings are in public. We'll talk about what a meeting is and what a meeting isn't, unless the closed session is allowed. We have to make the agendas and the documents available to the public. So the same time you get the documents, the public should be getting the documents. So sometimes you may get an agenda packet that's maybe missing a resolution or missing a contract. As soon as that contract or resolution is ready, and we give it to council or the commission, we have to make it available to the public. It also requires that the public be allowed to attend the meeting and comment. So is it helpful if the public is sitting in their seats shouting?
No.
Not helpful at all. Not helpful at all. And sometimes you think, oh gosh, how can we address this? And especially in the smaller communities where people know each other and feel comfortable with those back and forth exchanges. Like, how do we address this and still know that we don't want to insult anybody, right? So what I always tell people is, and I did this recently in a televised meeting, probably the meeting you watched, where I had to get up here and I had to say, this is a meeting of the council in front of the public, not a meeting of the public in front of the council. But in order for us to capture what the public has to say in the minutes, it has to be from here. Otherwise, we're not capturing it. And so we phrase it as, this is a really important, this is an important input that you have, members of the public, and we need to hear it. So if you could wait and speak from here, that would be helpful. So that's one way to address those. You know, we know that you're here and you have input, but shouting and riots and behavior not going to happen. Posters, those kind of things. But there's rules around all of that as well. So if you have members of the public here with posters, and I encourage you to watch one of the city of Hollister meetings, the most recent on August 21st. If you want to watch a meeting where there's a ton of posters, where there was absolute chaos, if you want to watch that meeting, I think it would be helpful. I actually sit at that meeting. And at one point, we take breaks. There's things that you can do with those disruptions. And so I think it's educational, it's a public record. It would be helpful if I kind of had a little snippets in here. Probably saw a little bit of PTSD from it. I don't know. Lots of learning opportunities. Yes.
So if I may ask you a question, seem like we're here. Does the public have access to our meeting here?
Absolutely. You have
So
an agenda.
they were actually, it was actually publicized that we were.
Correct. Yeah, it was that you have an agenda, it's posted properly, and the public can come to these. And I know I've done trainings here in the past where the public has attended the meetings as well. So, yeah, everyone's welcome to attend. Great question. Okay, so who is subject to the Brown Act? Well, your governing bodies are going to be subject to the Brown Act. Subcommittees, commissions. And when we say subcommittees, that needs to be a quorum of your council or your board. When it's an ad hoc committee, less than a quorum, that is not subject to the Brown Act. You don't have to post meeting agendas like the public can knows because we have less than a quorum. A private entity created by the legislative body or funded by the local agency. An example of another commission that was created by this city was the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So that's an example. They're subject to the Brown Act as well as the advisory committee to that agency. And so that advisory committee has to follow all of the Brown Act rules. And then hospital EC. So this is just a nuance in the law. That's if you are a city that owns a hospital, directs a hospital, they would of course be subject to the Brown Act as well. It's a small nuance, I don't think whatever occur. The government code states that governing bodies are subject to the Brown Act if the entity is the governing body of a local agency or any other local body created by state or federal statute. So we also have what's called special districts, like mosquito abatement district. They're created pursuant to statute, and so that is what that law is referring to. So, what is a meeting? When do we have a meeting? Do we have a meeting if three council members go to the council cities conference and sit together?
Not officially, no.
Not officially, no, you're right. You're right. Even though we have a quorum and we're all sitting at the conference together, it's not an officially noticed meeting. We don't put up an agenda and invite the public and repeat events. But if you're sitting together at any one location, coffee shop, Starbucks. You go, I mean, it's a small community, right? You go to a school event together, you go to whatever the event is. You're out to dinner at the same place, you're sitting together. What's the perception gonna be?
Brown
That
act.
you're meeting. The perception, the public perception is gonna be that we're talking about city business. You may not be, you may be sharing stories about your family, your schools, again, you live in a small community here. But there is that perception, and then all of a sudden you see pictures on Facebook, social media. Like, here's a quorum, you know, meeting over here at this event, here's a quorum, there's a holiday park here. And so it is public perception. So if you want to avoid those types of public perception when you're at Cal Cities, maybe kind of around and all gather together. Again, your choice. But those are the situations you're gonna have to deal with. Is that public perception. And so it's a meeting, even if no action is taken or no concurrence is reached. So maybe we're just getting a presentation on our waste disposal. Or maybe we're getting a presentation from the EDC. Even though no action is being taken, it's still a formal meeting that is subject to the Brown Act. And when we say subject to the Brown Act, that means the public has the right to comment on everything on your agenda. They can comment on closed session. And just because they're up there thinking what they know what that potential litigation is, doesn't mean you're going to sit out there and confirm that, yeah, that's what it is. But the public has a right to comment. There is one difference. So you have a regular public comment period on your agenda for items not on the agenda. When you have a special meeting, you are not required to have that public comment period, because when you have a special meeting, you're here for a very specific purpose. So like tonight, we don't have a general public comment session on the agenda because we're here for a very specific purpose. Public can still ask questions about that specific item. Okay, so it's not a meeting. When we touched on this, your individual conference, not a meeting, public conferences. You guys maybe attend the LAPCO meeting or come to the advisory committee meeting for the GSA or community meetings, social gatherings, staff meetings, confirming availability for meetings. So if Paul's calling around and saying, "Hey, are you available for this meeting?" We're not having a meeting like doing that. So that's not considered a meeting. And I think those distinctions are important. Keeping in mind this idea of perception from the public. So we're not at a noticed agenda meeting, and we're not all just gathered around, you know, at Starbucks talking, the majority of us. But I pick up the phone and I call the mayor. Mayor, you know, what do you think about cannabis? Well, just by that question, how he answers that question, what am I going to know? If he says I'm in favor of it, what am I going to figure out?
Which way he's going to vote on something.
I know exactly how he's going to vote on that item, right? So then I pick up the phone, different time, different day, and I say, "Vice Mayor, how do you feel about cannabis?" And that individual says, "Oh, I'm in favor." So now the mayor's in favor, vice mayor's in favor, I'm in favor. I'm going to win that vote. That is an illegal meeting. Even though the conversations took place at a different time, different day. And so what we have are these concepts of chain links and hub and spokes. You can go to that next slide. Let's skip down to, there you go, yeah. So the one I just described to you is a hub and spoke. You have one person making a phone call out to other people. So when the city manager calls you and says, "Hey, I have this letter that's going to be on the agenda," and you guys maybe talk about it back and forth. And then he calls the next council member, "Hey, I have this letter that's going to be on the agenda," so on, down to all five. That's not a violation of the Brown Act unless your city manager says, "Well, this is how the mayor feels about it. And this is how the vice mayor feels about it." And then you have a problem. So you have that intermediary, right? And that intermediary can be your city manager, can be your city attorney, and can call around and and let you know these things. It's the engaging back and forth and then sharing that information with other council members. So that's the hub and spoke scenario. And I will share with you that cannabis example is a real example from the previous council here. That is a real example. And honestly, that council member thought it was harmless. I'm glad they asked. That they really didn't know that that was a drug violation. I have to call this person over and then call that person separate. And so that's how we talk about it in terms of, well, you're going to know how they vote. You're basically polling them. The other one is this linear changing. And so, your mayor, health vice mayors. So I am really against expanding the wastewater treatment plants. So that we can expand and have more homes in here, really against that. And then vice mayor called an expert, hey, I'm really against it coming in. So that's going to be a Brown Act violation. That's going to be an illegal meeting because now it's going to be one person, then the next person, to the next person. And that's what we call those chain meetings. And so we can't have those either. You can have a serial meeting. It doesn't have to even be verbal. It can occur through the use of technology. And so sometimes, kind of gives me a little bit of heartburn, I'll have a city manager that sends out a blast to all of council. Police on the scene at X, Y, and Z. Totally fine until someone hits reply all. And then we're in a whole other ballgame. So when we send emails to our commissions and our council, we will normally BCC all of the members. Because then you can't accidentally reply all for grant purposes. We want to avoid replying all for those exact reasons. So even your DMs, your text messages, your emails, just be careful with those. Social media is a unique creature in and of itself, and I know a lot of elected and appointed. That's how we communicate with the public, right? And so it's okay for you to communicate on social media platforms with members of the public. That's fine. Keep in mind you're creating public records for PRA purposes, but that's okay. The trouble comes when you start communicating or liking with your co-board members, co-council members. And this new law doesn't even require that a majority of you communicate about the same thing on the same council, which is one other council member or board member. So if you start hitting a like on a post that says, we're all in favor of your topic, selling the property across the street. We're all in favor of that. And that's a vice mayor post. And then the mayor goes on and hits like, that's going to be a Brown Act violation, even though only one other person. Yeah. And that's the way the new law is written. It used to be, right, it used to be the other way when you had public forum. So you need to be really careful.
Which law is that? Is that on here?
No, so what we gave to you, backing up a little bit, are the different teleconferencing.
Oh, okay.
We can share this PowerPoint with you and this slide in particular talks about it. So any member of the legislative body responding directly to any communication from another member on an internet-based social media platform regarding a matter within their subject matter jurisdiction is prohibited. And that is new. So, yes, you're talking about what about blocking people? Okay, so that's not social media. So that is a great question because now we're talking about free speech. Maybe that's a whole other area. We could spend a whole hour talking about that. Because if you have a council member page and you start blocking people, you're going to get trouble. You will.
From whom?
From the person that filed the lawsuit against you.
Is it an FTPC?
That's for conflict of interest. And I know that Jen's going to talk about conflict of interest high level. When there's a conflict of interest and you get the FTPC involved, like the ground potential conflict of interest, you can't even rely on a phone call to them. It has to be written advice from them. Can't rely rely on advice from the city attorney in a defense. So it's different, but what we're getting into are free speech rights.
So, well, we, that's still, the mayor.
Okay, so it's gonna be very fact specific. So if Bob has his private page where he has members of his family on there, that's different than Bob having mayor of Greenfield page and then one.
Okay.
That's gonna be a problem. These are all very factually intensive. And that's why I reach out to the city attorney when you have these questions, like, can I block this person that this speech is awful? Because then we do an analysis of hate speech. So I've had law enforcement cases where the information on there could really incite violence. The comments, my first inclination is turn on comments. You don't allow comments, you can put information out there, but why are you allowing comments? But I take a more conservative approach. If it's going to incite violence, we can remove it, but we do an analysis of what the actual is. So there's no one size fits all, but if it raises red flags, let us look at it and then more advice.
To kind of elaborate a little bit on the question that Councilman Brochus had. So if it's because you mentioned that it's specific to if it's our personal page, like I personally don't have any like council member or council related social media or anything like that. So, but that would still be a violation. Like say if me and Rachel were on the same post or me and one of the commissioners, right? Even if it's a personal page, then it's still.
If you're talking about city business. Are you talking about you're in your council capacity? Are you saying, gosh, that property across the street, you could really make some money on that? When we could donate it to the courts and they could build a new courthouse there and come in and use it, or we can expand the contract use for the courts here at City Hall. When you're talking about city business, so those are the things that raise red flags. Then can you block someone if you're going to actually treat your private page for city business?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So if we're commenting on city business from our personal page, then it's really not our personal page.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Like you can't hide under that, guys.
Yeah.
Great person page, so
Yeah, no, I
out of love. Yeah.
I don't do that. But I mean, just like liking posts, right? Because use the example of like, if we both even like a post and the city of Greenfield, for example, like post, you know, different stuff that is going up around town or new buildings and stuff. And I know that on those, we're probably like all liking, you know, the development going on in the town and stuff. So is that also, would that,
You can
Be a
communicate
violation?
back and forth with members of the public.
okay, so because it's not directly one of us
Right.
posting
It's
it.
when you
and
are
we're responding
posting
to
and commenting on each other's posts. That's exactly what that says. So that's that's inside.
The pretty sure we don't like that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to wrap this up, so specifically, there's some banners going up around town. I don't know who posted it. But the city posted it. So not two council members, but a council member and a planning commission allegedly may have thumbed it up and commented. So is that
Two different bodies.
okay?
We're talking about.
So, but now if I also thumbed it up, then, so I can't thumb it up. So we just gotta,
It raises red flags.
okay.
And really, if we end up in court, these are very factually intensive cases. They come down to the facts. And so I would take a conservative approach and not.
Is this a new July 1 law?
No, I think it's 2020.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been around for a little while.
So I think the one you're talking about is has to do with the kinds of meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe 2021.
Yeah, it's recent.
That's scary.
Okay.
Mhm.
So how would you determine if you're violating somebody's agreement?
By what scenario? By saying next meeting.
Well, you could say that there's a possibility that someone could interpret something and it could be something that's going to stop violence. How would you go about saying, well, he just saying what he feels? And I mean, he's got a right to say that. And then someone over here says, no, no, Tony's son started lying. You know, so
Yeah.
how do you ascertain that fine line where you're not gonna prohibit him from saying it, or you are gonna let him?
Yeah, so fortunately for us, for the attorneys, we have case law, and case law sets precedent, and case law has those very factually intensive cases. And so when you contact us and you say, look, I don't want this on my page, on my commissioner page anymore, this isn't appropriate. We would look at it, and then we look at case law, and we look at First Amendment law, and then we would advise you accordingly. So that's what I mean when I say we're very factually intensive. So when we advise the police department to take their posts down, that's because someone's out there saying, like, I'm gonna come in with a gun and shoot everybody. Like it's pretty intense language, right? So, and sadly, these are what we encounter. Now, would the mayor be violating someone's free speech rights if during public comment he said, no, you don't need to comment, but you over here comment? Absolutely, would be violating.
Yeah, extending. But maybe I'm sharing this before. When people start getting mad like that, you want to interpret getting mad by posting stuff like that. A lot of them just use bravado, so then,
Yeah.
but there's still going to be like, thing like that.
Well, but so this is why they're factually intensive. It may be bravado because someone doesn't necessarily agree with the position in there, but then someone who voted for you or appointed you said something that someone else interprets as bravado, and now we're going to allow. So that's why these are such factually intensive matters. And I really encourage you to engage the city attorney if you have a question about it, because really. Our job is to protect the city. And so if there's a chance that the city could be named in a lawsuit because you're acting in your official capacity and perhaps violating the Brown Act or violating free speech rights, we need the opportunity to jump in and help, because not only will the city be named in these, you'll be named in them personally. And so you're part of the city, right? You're part of it, you're the commission. No, it's like,
Well, because sometimes I don't like to really engage in social media all that much. But when I see things and they're completely wrong factually, and so I do go on and clear it
yeah,
up.
and you can clear it up because you can engage with the public.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you're entitled to your opinion,
Yeah.
to change facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you're engaging with the public and you say, look, this isn't what's happening. What is happening is we're building over here, and council or the planning commission appear to really like this project. And then another commissioner comes on.
Okay, that's the red light.
You absolutely have the right to engage
Okay.
with the public. And because that's who you represent, right?
Right.
These are the people that voted for you, appointed you, like that's who you represent. You have to engage with them.
So the problem would be if she posted something like that and then an attorney got on there and liked that post.
That's the problem.
Doing that though then defines your account as you are using it for the position that you're holding, right?
I mean, we can still try to hide behind the fact that it's my personal page.
Right.
Then
But
we
if
have
you're
a-
clarity, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even it has a picture of my dog. That's my. Wow.
No, I get it. And it's really, we want you to be able to engage with the public. It's what we want to avoid on the ground of violations where there could be a legal development.
Me too now.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. One-way transmission of information. So like I was explaining earlier, Paul can contact each of you, relay information. You just can't start sharing the conversations and the opinions of what's going on. Now, this one gives me a little bit of heartburn because I think it's so easy to cross that line, but if there's something information that you're going to share, like, hey, Chamber of Commerce dinner. Here you go, everybody. Here you go, my council members, my commissioners, Chamber of Commerce meeting. I don't see any problem with that. It's when we start commenting back and forth. Well, I don't like what they did in the downtown, and they aren't helping us out, and didn't like that last event they put on. That's going to be troublesome. So I like to avoid that altogether. Let the city manager distribute or the attorneys distribute.
The good thing about the city attorneys is there's attorney-client privilege. So when we send out our communications, or we're talking about a development with you or a matter with you in closed session, that's all privilege. And the only way that can get out legally is if the council or the commission vote to waive the privilege. And so it's nice to have the law.
So if they decide to waive this privilege, does that have to be done in public or is it done in closed session?
Oh, no, in the public. Yeah, in the public. I'll give an example. So we did a confidential memo regarding, council members and their capacity as employees. Council members are not considered employees unless they're very specific limited reason. So we did a confidential memo to council. Well, council wanted to waive the privilege and have that memo in public. The council, the majority say we're going to waive the privilege. That memo becomes public and we're doing it public. We don't recommend it, but you know, we're advisors. We're not decision makers. Yeah. Okay, next slide. We talked about this already. Please beware of the reply all. No matter what platform you're on. So when can our governing boards meet? So this tonight is a special meeting. So we only have to give 24 hours notice. It's a special meeting. If it's a regular meeting, we have to give 72 hours notice for our constituents. Now, I have some councils and boards that say, gosh, 24 hours, it seems like enough. Like, how are people going to find out about this? It doesn't mean you can't post it sooner. This is the, like, you can't go beyond that. You can't post it in 23 hours, 22 hours, 71 hours. So where can governing boards meet? Usually within the boundaries of a local agency. I do know past councils here are taking field trips places, and that's okay. We just post that that's going to go on, and this is where it really needs a public knows and as well. Or, you know, if you're Coalinga and Great Lake has leveled your city, you're not meeting as a council in your city, right? So then you live outside the city. All right, so let's get into remote options. And this is the handout. So during COVID, so let me back up. We have traditional Brown Act rules. Our traditional Brown Act rules say that less than a quorum can appear remotely at a meeting, either via phone, via Zoom. But you're going to have to post the agenda where you're going to be. You're going to have to open it up to the public. So if you're attending from the LEAP conference, got to make sure that agenda was posted there. Then the agenda posting requirement time limits. And got to have your phone on speakerphone. So that the public can come in. And you can attend and vote. And make comments. As if you were attending in person. Those are our traditional practices. Then we have COVID things. I don't know, did you guys go full remote?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, full remote for COVID. So the idea behind AB 361, which is another column in the chart that you have, this was during COVID and during a declared state of emergency. So you could meet remotely, didn't have to open it up to the public, kind of defeats the purpose if we're in the middle of COVID, right? So come into my home. Our computer. Kind of defeats the purpose. So you could appear remotely. The public could appear remotely and comment. They could email in their comments. You read. This is all what occurred during the public here. If you have technical difficulties under the AB 361, you stop the meeting and fix those problems. Because that's how the public could only attend under AB 361. So the key to AB 361 is you had to have a state of emergency by the governor, and then locally you had to have a state of emergency renewed every 30 days. So I recall seeing that come up every 30 days on your agenda. That's the governor. Governor worked with their state of emergency. So AB 361 does not apply. So you have to have the third state of emergency, and it's only in effect until January 1, 2024. So we're going to allow that COVID again, right? So if the governor comes back in October, and I'm not foreshadowing anything, and said, I've declared a new state of emergency. The city declared a state of emergency. From that time period in October until January 1, 2024, you go back to the AB 361. So it's very specific. So those rules, as of right now, this point in time, you cannot use AB 361. So,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
So if the governor declares a state of emergency, okay? And the city doesn't.
And you're not gonna do so. It's a
So
requirement of
his-
AB 361.
His proclamation doesn't supersede the city.
No, it does not. We need both. We need both. What helps the city is when the governor has declared a state of emergency. That is in essence assisting the public agency so that they can then declare the state of emergency.
But the city wouldn't have to if they don't.
No. They don't have to. Now, keep in mind that could affect your funding. So we're in a state of emergency and they're giving out a lot of ARPA funds and you haven't followed the rules. I mean, look at Kalinga. They knowingly remained open. And this is public record, this is why I can share it. Kalinga knowingly remained open and they did not get ARPA funds. Like they knew that they were not going to get funds because they defied the federal government. So that's a risk. Anyway.
Or was there work previously to that? Not if they stayed open, they wouldn't get the funds, or we find out after.
No, they know, everybody knew they were staying. It wasn't a secret.
No, I mean, but if the city aware that if it stayed open, they wouldn't get the funds.
Yes. They were well aware. They were aware. So now what we have are these just cause and emergencies represented. You know, a little tricky. These are in effect until January 1, 2026. So if you don't want anyone in your house, basically you can follow the rules.
If they apply.
Yes, if they apply. So I'm gonna bring these up. I'll sit down with this, so I will make sure I get this right.
Yeah.
Roll on down.
We'll start with this one.
Oh.
23.
Okay. So. We have this other law, AB 2449. It allows board members to attend meetings remotely without the need for a proclaimed state of emergency if the individual board member has just cause or a qualifying emergency. We're going to define those under the law. Next slide. Just cause. You have a child care issue, you can't get there. You have to take care of them. You have a contagious illness. You have a disability. You're down in Cal City. You can conference. Emergency is you have a physical emergency or a family emergency. So scroll on down. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth. Here's the thing. The law didn't necessarily define family emergency. It didn't define the emergency for you, right? But you can imagine if you're having an emergency, you know you're having an emergency. So for the just cause one, you need to notify council as soon as possible, or the board as soon as possible. Do that through the city manager or the city attorney. You have to include a general description of your circumstances. So go back to that. So remember, just causes. There you go. Just cause every child care is due to caregiver needs sick, illness, disability, or okay. Then emergency. You're going to make your request to the board. You're going to separate the request for each remote meeting. Emergency here, emergency there, another emergency. We're going to post the request on the agenda if possible. Even if it's already been published, not going to be able to post it. And then the board needs to take action to approve you attending the emergency. This is the fun part. The next slide. How often can you do this? So I had someone say, well, my child at home at night, well, I come to the council meetings and our meetings last till midnight. I really want to do this from home. And you can do it from home, but only 2 times per month. Without having to go to that. In an emergency, you can't do it for more than 40 consecutive months or 20% of the legislative body. The key here is that you don't have to open your hotel room, your home to the public. You can always do traditional Brown Act rules and appear remotely. It's posted on the agenda where the other meeting location is, telling your home address, your hotel address, and then again, you know, speakerphone, you gotta let people in. Kind of creepy to think about if you're in a hotel room and you know, it's like the whole public of it. So these are your options for remote meetings. Keep in mind that you can't use them to infinity. You can only use something for so long. So, easy peasy, right? Here's my any questions about remote meetings?
Well, there was a time, when did this 361 end? Because there must have been a period of time because I was sick and I wanted to attend remotely and I was told I couldn't.
Yes, 61 ended as soon as the governor's order ended, which I think was in March or May. So that's when 8361 stopped.
Okay.
And there may have been a time period where
And 2449, I think, started in January, so they might have had some overlap.
Mhm.
so you could have used the 8241.
Yeah, can you remember stuff? I was after that one, and then I went online and I was told, you know, nothing to do with the city, commitment or something.
Yeah, and those might have been nuanced. Maybe it wasn't, you didn't give notice of why you needed to. I don't know what the
Well,
school.
I'm not a $10 bill, I'm gonna come and make a good offer.
Yeah.
I thought I was legitimate.
But we have to give that notice prior to the meeting.
If you know you're sick.
Do you know how much time before?
Doesn't say.
The law not that specific. And that's the trouble with our laws, right? Like we think practically as we try to use these laws, I think the drafters don't really recognize all the potential nuances to this, and so that there was the amendments to law. I mean, we saw amendments to 8361 throughout the entire time of the choose.
So I mean, so there's, I'm just trying to correct, there's no time frame when you have to notify them, is that correct?
As soon as you know.
Oh, yeah, I
If
mean,
you know you're sick and you weren't gonna make it, and you know the night before about you feeling pretty crappy, you gotta know.
or even that morning, I mean, we're
Even
tired
that
from
morning.
the traffic accident and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You know, if you've used up your 2 times and you try to do it again, then you have to say, you can attend as a member of the public. You can comment as a member of the public, you just can't participate. So let's go back to the agenda. We talked about when it needs to be posted. All items have to appear on the agenda. Why is that?
No surprises.
No surprises.
Yeah.
So when a member of the public looks at your agenda, they have to be able to say, oh, I might be interested in that item. I'm gonna go for the 10. So when we're reviewing an agenda and we see it and we look at the description and we're like, I have no idea what that item's about. If we don't know what the item's about, there's no way the public's gonna know what the item's about, right? Just reading it, no one's gonna know what it's about. So your agenda needs to be clear. The public has to know what business is going on for the simple reason that the public may be interested in that item. If you're talking about cannabis, we need to be specific about that because you have people in this community that are interested in cannabis, either for or against, whatever it is. What if we forgot to put something on the agenda? And now I really want to talk about it. But we're going to be interested in that agenda.
I don't think so.
Well, the public doesn't have knowledge.
So that's the whole thing, right? So we want to make sure the public has an opportunity to participate. But there are times when we have catastrophic events. I'm going to use the earthquake in Kalinga again. There is not enough time to get that on the agenda and get it posted properly. So we're going to make emergency findings as a council. and you make specific findings, and you vote, and you move.
So I'm gonna digress here a little bit.
Okay.
if I may. You mentioned earlier that if you're running a meeting, you have to post it 72 hours in advance, correct?
Correct.
Okay, there's been a situation because I, for the most part, request a hard copy of an agenda. There's been times where I'll call in the morning, Monday morning, we have a meeting on Tuesday. And I'll say, can I have a hard copy? And they'll say, well, the agenda hasn't been posted yet.
So are you talking about special meeting agenda?
I
I mean, I know for a fact Ann will post them on time. So I don't know why you're being told that, but if I were you, call and ask for Ann.
Oh, I'm calling the person in charge of the plant commission. Because like I said, I'm really done with it.
Yeah,
For the most part, I always ask for a hard copy.
yeah.
And
Well, that's on that.
then, I mean, on notifications, I've had the response, well, the agenda hasn't been posted yet. Well, it should have been posted like on Friday.
Absolutely, it should have been. Check on it. She'll check on it. We have to follow these rules, or you can't talk about it, right? So for them to say it hasn't been posted, that could be a problem. So Ann will check on it. And I appreciate that. Subsequent need items. So interestingly, I just did this last night and more. We had a situation, our agenda's already been posted, they're in a meeting last night. We had an emergency, not an emergency, I don't call it that. We had an immediate need to talk about an item in a session, potential litigation. That's all I can share. Potential litigation. So we found out about it at probably 2:00 in the afternoon. Our council meeting started at 5:30. Obviously not going to be posted on the agenda, right? So at the council meeting, I had to specifically say, this item came up. It's urgent. It cannot wait until the next meeting. We can't even wait 24 hours to post a special meeting notice and then be approved, but this item has to go now. The council by 2/3, which would be 4/5 here, has to make that finding and has to vote to put that item on the agenda. And then we need to make people aware of it, like that. And we know it's later as soon as we can have the meeting. So that item we got to go into closed session second, because we made those findings and I got the requisite votes needed to put it on the agenda. But we don't want to do that unless it truly meets the subsequent item. So I had another council member say to me, I really want to do the city manager evaluation tonight. Can we put it on? No, you can't. What do you mean I can't put it on? So we have to do it on the meeting and that was this agenda in advance, putting things to comments. Held over items, so these should be on your agenda anyway. So if we move the public hearing, it should be on the agenda. If we build it over, note at the top of your agenda, this items being moved held over. Response to public comments. Always a tricky one. So if I'm standing up here and I'm like, Mr. Bob White, I don't like you and I don't like what you've been doing. And you know, that's not say, I just really don't like you and I don't like what you're doing.
Get a second on that.
Yes.
Stop. And he said,
That's it.
you start getting in a dialogue back and forth about candidates, the attorney's gonna jump in and say, if we're gonna go to discussion about candidates, this item should be agendized because members of the public might be. I know it's we want to respond, or we get to our council commissioner comment period, right? We don't want to have these discussions back and forth. Like, oh, yeah, you're right. I do think we need an EIR for that project. Yeah, and then on top of that, what's the next period for that? And then this conversation starts going back and forth, back and forth. I'm going to jump in every time and say to my council, if you're going to have this discussion, it needs to be agendized so that the public has an opportunity to say, the public might be really interested in it. Might be really interested in that new startups that they're going to put in. So let's agendize it. And that usually stops the conversation. I know sometimes we get excited about our service and things going on in the community, we want to talk about it, but if we back up and we tell ourselves the Brown Act is using law. And the purpose of it is so that the public can participate. That's going to be important.
I'm gonna stop you right there.
Sure.
So, you know, when I remember, because I got called out on this and I still don't think I was wrong. But a member of the public came up and made statements that I knew weren't true. And I clarified that isn't the case. We have grown. We're not in a period of no growth. And then he called me out for it. So are you not supposed to clarify?
You can clarify. You can say a real brief statement, but to get it a back and forth,
Mhm.
you know, like maybe you can agendize that item, or if you have a commissioner comment period that is in your meeting, bring it up then.
Okay.
You know, that's your time.
Right.
That I want to clarify, you know, we do have growth, but if we do.
I mean, I have 5 bankers boxes at home full of growth documents,
Right.
so.
Right, yeah, and you can simply say that and move on, and that member of the public is not allowed to get back up and comment unless you do a public comment to everybody.
Well, you said it on a different item.
Yeah, I mean, you can, and if we agree, no, that's not true. You know, you go on,
Okay.
and their comments. It's just that back and forth.
Right.
Long discussion. So I think this is so important. It is a meeting of the council or board in front of the public. It is not a kumbaya session where we all sit around with the public and try to figure it out. If you have business you need to accomplish, and you have to be able to accomplish that business.
Mhm.
If you have constant shouting and interruptions from the audience, my first recommendation is take a break. Then take a break. We're going to come back so that we can continue the business. Take a few breaks if we need to. You can say, obviously, we can't get our business done. We're going to stop this meeting and we're going to renotice it for another time. Probably going to be a really inconvenient time for the public, but we're going to renotice it for another time. We actually, in the Brown Act books that we provided for you, previously we needed a new one, but so we actually have scripts. So this is important for our chairs. Back here on how to do that recording and be and actually visually exact verbiage for instructions. We can use the script and we have to handle it. And it's legally compliant. And you can remove individual people after you've given so many words. And you can clear chambers after you've given so many words because you have to let the press day. But you have to be able to connect with it. I always recommend the breaks. I think if you have to take a break every 10 minutes, eventually the public's going to get tired. Tenacious. But it happens. And watch that meeting of Hollister from.
You get the feel for it. You don't stop it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And you know, it's interesting, we do a training internally at our firm, for statewide, everybody comes together and that is the exact training that we had this last August was that I'm moving the meetings. It's kind of fun. It's a good time. So it's just important to know, and you know, we want the public to participate, but at the right time from here, so we can capture it in minutes. And that's again address it that way. Like, you know what you have to say is important. Please wait until we get up here. Now, if you let one person go past your time limit on the comment, everybody's spoken, you know, someone comes up and say, I have something else to say. You, as the mayor and the chair, can say, oh, public comments over, because the minute you let that person come back up, you have to let everybody else come back. So let's talk about what are some hot topics? Cannabis, dogs,
People's kids.
people's kids. Yeah, people are passionate, right? Wastewater. People are pretty passionate about those topics. So the minute you let someone else go over, the minute you let someone else come back up, you're going to let everyone else do it. And I'm not saying you can't, but keep in mind it has to be fair to everybody.
So when somebody presents me, I want to do it.
Everybody goes up. Yeah, and that's why it's good to stick there, you know, things for months. Right. And so your time limit is 3 minutes. Let's talk about something else regarding public comment. If your time limit is 3 minutes and you have a non-English speaker that needs a translator, it is up time. It's not the other way around. The law is very specific.
What if, you had this situation in planning commission previously? Let's say you only have one person in the audience. And that person comes up and she wants to speak or they want to speak. Are we still? Do we still give them 3 minutes in order to give them the speaking or is it also all right to say, okay, do it?
Just rock it. You want to make them 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I recommend putting limits because if they're up here for an hour and you need to move on.
I understand that, but so then if we do that, let's say we have 2 people and person A comes up and, you know, you look around and say, okay, well, go ahead. And she's up there or there, I think it's 7.5 minutes. So then we have the obligation to give the second person the same time for the correct.
The same 7 minutes. Everybody gets equal 3 minutes. And you know what? When you have these disruptions and you're telling people to be quiet, and if a person who, and I'm only saying this because this is what's happening in one of my communities. If it's a person who voted for you that you really like, and they're shouting from their seat and you're not saying anything, but the person over here who didn't vote for you, and they're shouting, and you're like, nah, this is your warning. If you're gonna give warnings, we have to give them across the board there. You can't pick and choose. You gotta give it's a warning for everybody. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. But those are situations that I encounter. Yeah, of course.
The thing we have someone in the audience who literally use for discussion. Sits down, remembers something, comes back, or he comes back here. Say something, go back down and go.
Yeah, no, I'm sure this is their one shot. One shot.
Serial commenter.
After your meeting, if everybody took 30 seconds, that back down, go back up. I'm gonna take my, because what they're trying to do is hear what other people are saying, and they want to comment on that. Or when an item, public comments closed, it goes back to council or the commission. And council and commission start debating. Sometimes the members of the public say, oh, I have something else I want to say. No, we're done. We're done.
It's like backgammon, once you put your dice up, your move's fine.
You're done. You're moving. And
Good for them. Probably really dramatic. Correct. It's
yeah, so I could jump in, Jennifer could jump in. I've jumped in before and I'm like, whoa, there. You let this one person come back up. You all let everybody else come back up. No, we're done. And then move on. So sometimes we'll jump in and act as the intermediary, but I think you should say like that, like just public comments closed. Thank you. Next meeting, if you want to come back up, you can. I think you could say that lovely. Yeah.
People having conversations. And it's very erotically forced. And then really comes up and other people are sitting there listening, but they want to attend the meeting, and yet they're listening.
Yeah, I think you just simply say, hey, we need to get back our business.
Yeah, the script that is in the Brown Act handbook, it really is geared towards disruptions, and if that conversation is disrupting your meeting, that's the time in the mayor.
No, I mean, like just making somebody else in the audience.
Oh,
Not comfortable, where they're like, I mean, come here to hear all this.
Right, so you're talking about whispering that only that person can hear. That person can get up and move over or walk around and say, yeah, there's nothing that's disrupting your meeting with the chair and the mayor. Yeah.
So we had an instance at a planning commission meeting. It was a public hearing. The applicant spoke. We did our questions. We did our public comments, and then we closed the public hearing. And then he wanted to come back up. And so that was it was our discretion to let him speak again, or do you have to open up the public hearing?
I recommend you reopen the public hearing. And this is why this is important. When there's a public hearing item, it is imperative that you say, I'm opening the public hearing and I'm closing the public hearing. Because if we end up in court and you haven't closed that public hearing, guess what? All this other testimony is going to be allowed. You have to close the public hearing. You have the right to reopen the public hearing. But always make sure that you close when you're saying those words. So sometimes if I have a mayor or commissioner miss it and they're like, we're going to open this for public comment, I will say, I'm noting for the record that this is the opening of the public hearing. And then they'll remember, then they'll say, okay, we're going to bring it back to council. And they'll say, I'm noting for the record, this is the closing of the public hearing for exactly those purposes. But you always have the right to reopen it.
Should there be given deference to the applicant versus a member of the public who wants to come back after it's closed?
Well, when you open a public hearing again, it's open to everybody.
I mean, deciding to reopen, if it's a,
I mean, you can make that argument that you reopen it to everybody.
okay.
Defense. If you're not, I don't think there's any favorites.
Mhm.
I think once you reopen it, it's not just for that one individual. I think there will be a need to bring everybody.
Well, going along with the step you said. So. Arnold Adams comes up. Speaks what he wants to say. So then if step decides to reopen it, can he come back up again?
Yeah. Okay, so people are allowed to record, people are allowed to live stream to their Facebook page, people are allowed to take pictures, people are allowed to have posters. What they can't do is block anyone else's view. So if you have people in the front row, and again, I'm going to refer you to that on the thinkers meeting, there's a lot of people who cheap posters. They can't block the view of people. So you'll see in that meeting, you might be able to see one son tries to put up a sign in the front row and the mom has them put it down. So we didn't have to intervene, but you can ask them to stand along the sides or move to the back when they're blocking the view of anybody.
Or hold it down in front of them.
Yeah, we can't tell them that they can't have their poster there. They want to hold it up high, just go back to it and hold their poster up high. Because we don't want you to block the view of anyone else. And instructions, we can talk about that. Great script. Pretty good.
Can I just touch on disruptions?
Yes.
Because I've been going to meetings for quite a while, since 2010, and there was the meeting, I mean, they had drums. There was a crowd of 300 people and it was a disruption, but the mayor wouldn't stop it. So,
Yeah, and that's hard when the mayor is going to stop it because who runs the meeting? The mayor. So a council member can say, you know, point of order. Vice mayor can step in, you know, a point of order. You guys can look at the mayor. Mayor, you need to do something about this. The script is there for you. Use the script.
mhm,
Give the warning if the mayor won't or if the chair won't, but I can tell you in this scenario, your mayor's going to give the warning.
yeah,
Yeah, so I don't, but I think when you have someone new, that's why experience is so important.
mhm,
Maybe they were nervous, maybe they just didn't know. Oh my gosh, I can't stop this meeting. Then what do I do? And in that instance, we as city attorney should jump in.
mhm,
And that's what we do. Like I would say, you aren't able to conduct your business right now. So if you watch that August 21st meeting, you're going to see I actually get up here and explain the rules and explain that it's important for people to talk from here, and it helps kind of temper the
mhm,
mood. You'll also notice the city clerk had a number of public speakers, and the city clerk didn't stop calling people up. And there were applause going, and she was like, I'm not going to keep calling people. You guys better listen for your name. But she was adamant, and I could slowly die down. That's fine. So who we call for the reporter? If we have somebody online or they're sending you she doesn't like what we send you. And she probably knows it's wrong. Well, okay, it depends. I'm gonna give the best lawyer answer that. a very tactical thing. If they're talking during a public comment period and she doesn't like what they're saying, that's just too bad. You guys are elected and appointed, and there's a different standard, a different level of scrutiny. And sometimes it's hurtful what people say, but we cannot restrict their speech. Now, you can ask them to report. You know, if they're out there dropping F-bombs, you can say, you know what, I'm gonna ask you to report. But you don't need to swear. But people are not gonna be able to call somebody, you know. I mean, if they're shouting from out there and no one's doing anything about it, all point of order. Yeah.
So for my clarification. So the only two people that can actually call point of order are the mayor and the vice.
No, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
If they don't do it and you have people shouting, they're kind of like the example Stephanie was given.
Right, well, that's. what I
Giving,
was-
they are not doing anything at the time. Someone else can say, hey, we need a point of order. Ideally, the city attorney should step in and say, there's no way you can respect business like this. I mean, I'll get at the podium, I've done it, and say, this is therefore.
Yeah, you call for an order.
If they are totally out of order, so I'll give you an example, and it's gonna be tough, right? You want to be really careful. So if you have a public commenter up here, and there starts to be this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, city attorney jump in, and that council member won't stop with the back and forth, they point of order, all point of order. But if you just don't like what they're saying, you're gonna hit some road, you're gonna hit some bumps.
But
Did
you would,
not- I'm sorry.
you would call point of order on, kind of like Rachel was saying, on Councilmember Ortiz was saying, if another person up there was saying something to attack a member of the public, right? Then that is always a justified reason to call.
The public, so this, okay, so getting into free speech rights. I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, if it's their time to speak, if it's their council comment and they're like, no, what you said isn't true. Well, the person out there could think, gosh, they're attacking me. So it's gonna be, we're talking about content of speech here. So for me to give a blanket answer is really dangerous. That's why I say it depends. So if you are uncertain, what's your city attorney?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like clarifying, like you said, like that's untrue, and like just saying something derogatory about a member of the public. That's what I meant, I guess, in terms of like they're out of
Free
order.
speech,
because-
even your council members have free speech rights, which you need to be really careful. And that instance came up recently for another city that I represent, where a council member was making derogatory statements to the public speakers when they came up. Oh, of course you can say that. You're in the developer's pocket. You're a whatever. Yeah.
Wow.
So you really, it's not fun and it's uncomfortable at times and it's like, gosh, can we just get our do this, right?
Great.
Or we could say, can I ask for some decorum here?
You've done that. You had to do
I
that.
had to do that.
Your first meeting.
My first one. There you go.
So, one of the friends, let's say that, on the average is attacking on the. And so, he knows the situation. And our mayor, then he's off of her, he just have to take it in.
That's gonna be up to the mayor. If he wants to say, I don't agree with your comments. He can say it then, he can say it, during council comments. I didn't agree with those comments that were made. The mayor can say that. It's the back and forth.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, I'm not saying that, I'm asking. If on the average, is attacking the ball on there. Okay, then the banner starts going back and forth.
Yeah.
With the attorney, step in and say, you know what, we have to do that.
No, the attorney won't say nothing to that. The attorney will say it depends on the topic, right? If they're bantering back and forth over a specific item that's not agendized, then we need to agendize the items to the public intent. So that's why I'm saying it depends. Now, I know this is hard. It's like the bully in school. If they're up here attacking me from the podium and you just don't respond, they're gonna get tired. I've seen it happen here. They're gonna get tired of coming to me because we frankly are getting on the fight of you who don't care. that's how it's gonna be, like, they're gonna get tired of, well, I'm not getting a response, I'm not getting a reaction. Okay, thank you for the comment. Thank you for the comment. I mean, I have some city councils, that's exactly it. They, you know, we have a homeless person that comes into one of our meetings constantly and berates, and we give them their 3 minutes and we listen to that. And then we say, thank you for your comments. Yeah, I know it's tempting, like, I was gonna turn into like a pretty tall. A few extra words to have.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, because I was under the impression that obviously I'm wrong now. Yeah, we were told. And I've been coming to city council meetings before, so.
yeah, I don't remember you, but I was.
Okay, so anyway, I was under the impression that people that were on the council at that time, if they were doing the fact that we just like to take it in, but one year was not.
Well, what we don't want are lengthy responses, so let's go back to the cannabis. Mayor, you're against cannabis, you don't know anything about it, you don't know anything about this, how could you do this, you're a horrible mayor, blah, blah, blah. And then the mayor engages back with that. Well, okay, but if we start getting into a substantive discussion about why cannabis is either good for our city or bad for our city, and it's not a next item, we have a problem. And not only that, if they're up here for the 3 minutes and you're interrupting them, we gotta give them the time difference. So if you are a council member or a planning commission member and you're interrupting their 3 minutes, they get the additional time back. So it's my recommendation that you not interrupt them. Let them have their 3 minutes and then say thank you for your comments. And then during your comment time, say, you know, there's a speaker who said X, I disagree. Or that is true. And then move on. And then I attended the week meeting and this was discussed, and then I attended, you know, GFA meeting.
And the important thing too is to remain calm when you make your response.
I think that's a perception. Because the minute you finish your call, it's gonna be on social media. And that will be the repeatedly. On loop. Yes.
Because I've seen people over the years, time and time again, they come up here and they're being subjective, not objective.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, you have to, it's like Bob said, I mean, it's like. Let's go, put up with it and then give them the 3 minutes and then say.
You do, you can ask them to, you know, provide some forum. And you don't go ahead and give them the comments. Yeah, let's get in an argument back and forth, but then you're interrupting like 3 minutes for one, and you're gonna have to give them makeup time.
So the meetings that I've been watching lately, a person will come up and make a public comment, and it's a divided council. It's 3-2, clearly, obviously.
Yeah.
And if the commenter is making a comment that 2 don't agree with, they call that commenter back to the podium and interrogate them on their stance.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. No, I wouldn't recommend that.
I know, I'm just like,
Yeah. Let me interpret you.
yeah,
May not take the fit.
yeah. So that's not not recommended,
No.
but it's not illegal.
So let's go back to the premise of these are open meeting laws, things need to be agendized.
Right.
So it's gonna be, what was the conversation?
Mhm.
They're always gonna be content
Yeah,
decisions. But on top of that, I think it's a dangerous proposition to call them back up and give them more time. Because now what do you have to do? You've got to get everyone else at the same time. And can you imagine a room filled with 100 people and they, you know, you can put reasonable time limits on a topic.
right.
And you can say, okay, we've heard all these comments, is there something different that someone wants to add? You know, you can put reasonable time limits, like we have like 30 minutes on this topic. So that's it. It's not, I would remove it. Yeah. And I've been in that company when I want to be in the city. So we're gonna watch it. Things are done. And you know, I take a very conservative approach because my job is to protect the city.
Right.
So I'm always going to take a more conservative approach because the last thing I want is a lawsuit.
Mhm.
But I want to protect the city. Is there leeway? Sure, there's some leeway there. There's some leeway, but I am going to take the most conservative approach. You may get another attorney in here someday that says, no, I'm fine with it. That's not your conservative approach. There's nothing illegal about calling them back up, right? It's not a conservative approach. Right?
Yeah, and it's super awkward.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that would almost inhibit people wanting
Exactly,
to come up here. It's
exactly.
like we're stifling
Mhm.
at a certain point when they fear that they're going to be pulled back up and interrogated.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see it in some of the other states, local cities,
Yeah.
saving happen. There, where they're getting something, it's brought up with the commission. How do we?
Well, I have some clarifying questions while we're here. So a public speaker comes up, they're like, hey, the street lights are out on such and such street. Really appreciate it if public works to come in there and fix it. And then I heard a counselor say, oh, where was that street again? Or say, can you tell me about the street again? Like, again, very content based, right? You want to know what street it is, and you're not interrupting them to interrogate them. You simply want to be able to fix the problem. Okay.
Travel safe.
Let's see. Okay, response to public comment. So we've kind of already touched on this, right? Respond briefly. You can ask a verifying question. You can refer the matter to staff. Always a good course, like, okay, city manager, we need to make sure the light gets fixed. Or sometimes the city manager will jump in. You know, I'm going to know. Ask to add items to future agenda for your rules and procedures of your board. And then again, not near premise that we want the public to participate. Inspections of documents. So sometimes you'll have like the chamber come up here, or someone come up here and say, yeah, I have documents that I need to give to the council. They could go to Ann, and then Ann will also make them available to the public. This is also the concept of when the council gets it, the public gets it. Same way. Closed session. So everything needs to be in open unless we have a valid reason to go into close. So talk about those valid reasons. So we're going to talk about real property negotiation. We want to bargain about the price. Why wouldn't I do that out in public?
You don't want the owner knowing what you want.
Being against yourself,
Yeah.
doing that for public litigation.
You don't want to disclose your strategies to
Yeah.
the opponent.
Could you imagine if we had to talk about your litigation items out here? If I were defense counsel, I'd be sitting in the front row,
Right.
taking notes every single meeting.
Right.
Some personnel issues. So the employees of the city or the city manager and the city attorney. Those you should be talking about in closed session. You shouldn't be talking about them in closed session, right? Because they're the council manager form of government. Those are the city manager's employees, not the council. Labor negotiations, again, for the same concept that we're negotiating. I was doing that in second program, we really said 8%. About 2, but when we get the negotiations, they only started with 4. Maybe the authority to 8. I heard it. And then security of public buildings for essential services that we don't want. You know, this is kind of happening to our white system or our public safety, you know, police officer items. And you'd be surprised. I do have some council like anything to this post, anyway, no. And I have to say no, there isn't. And when we're in closed, we better only be talking about the closed session agenda item. When we start veering off, we'll bring it up, like, hey, we need to fix the topic. It's been agendized. If it continues, we can't participate in the Brown Act violation. So at one community, I had to say, I'm sorry, I can't stand here when you do this. And as soon as I hit the door, I was like, oh, and it's not being rude, it's simply we can't participate in that. Next slide. So This is actually a requirement of the government code. You have to read the closed session instructions before you go into closed session. You can't just simply say, okay, we're gonna go into closed session. I was on your agenda. You actually have to go read them out loud. And then you have to report out. And this is what I talked about at the beginning. At some point, we have to marry open and closed session. So we're talking about initiating litigation. And council determined, yes, we want to initiate litigation against so-and-so. We take a vote. We have to report that out, right? We've married it. If we're smack in the middle of litigation and there's talks of a settlement, we're not going to report that out. We're still in talk. If we say, yes, we agree to a settlement, we're not even going to report that out because we don't sign it, right? The reporting out in that instance is the final agreement. Someone feels like they are report. There you go. There's the final agreement. So at some point in time, we want to marry this. It's not going to be in those instances immediate, right? But at some point in time, we do want to make that connection. Most oftentimes, it's no report. And when you're in closed session, let's say it's a real property negotiation and you need your planning director in there to explain something, they're allowed to attend, but they're subject to the confidentiality rule. Anything that takes place in closed session has to remain confidential. We cannot leave it in closed session. When you won't get these from closed session, right? We've had our confidential memo published in the paper. And all I was informed.
Glad you checked that twice.
I had a heart attack. I was like, it says attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
should not.
I have published right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know it, but it is confidential. And can you imagine? So we're under 8361 rules, everybody's remote, and someone's sitting in their kitchen and we go into closed session. I had to ask on numerous occasions, are you the only one in the room out of earshot of anyone else in their home? And we're in closed session. Documents from closed session, I always recommend you take them back because what happens if you leave it on your car? Things that. What happens if you take it into your home or you keep it in a file or you have those notes and somehow someone sees that? Well, we haven't honored the confidentiality of closed session. It has to remain confidential and it's actually a crime for it not to remain confidential. So I'm going to go to the next one. Next one. Would be a crime under the government code, you'd be guilty of a misdemeanor. If you violate the Brown Act, and the Brown Act is closed session. You can't slow it. I mean, and sometimes where we know we have an issue, sometimes as an attorney, we'll change one little thing on an memo. If we know the council's going to insist on keeping it, we'll change one comma on number one. On copy number two, we'll change the spelling of the word.
Tricky.
And we make a note of it, right? And when that copy ends up in the paper, I can tell you exactly who put it there. Or we say, we recommend you take all of these back. And I'll have a number, make sure I have all of them back.
So on this, a member who attends a meeting where action is taken in violation of the Brown Act. So staff is not bound by the Brown Act, or are they?
They are. So if they come in a closed session, they have to do a closed session. So if we bring the planning director in and talk about real property negotiations to get a better idea of the property price and terms. Not that it reaches the word. Talk about how we do cannabis and we don't want to sell it from cannabis person. It's price and terms. He can't go out there and share his family and share, so he may need the assistance of another planning director. People not to pay, but we're not going to have that stuff to the public. We're not by this.
Are you allowed to, when you go for a session, are you allowed to tell the public what you discussed?
No, what we tell the public is the exact agenda description. So we have agenda descriptions for each of those times we go in the closed session.
But let's say you're contemplating the termination of police officer for violations of blah, 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 blah.
So that won't be on there. Unless they're entitled to a public hearing, and those are very nuanced rules. And then they can ask for it to be in private or not in public, and it depends on who the appeals go to for terminations. So very, again, factually specific, but I want to show you an example. So for real property negotiations, this is the example that we would reach. We put the property address, we put who's negotiating on behalf of the city, who's the other negotiating party, and under negotiations with the price. So that's how the public knows what's going on. And we have, again, in your handbook that you all have, you'll see there's a description for every allowable. So that's how the public knows it's about that. If we say significant exposure to litigation, and the plaintiff isn't aware that that is about them, there's very specific rules for what we add to that description. Sometimes it will say one case.
I've seen that.
You know, it's even kind of top secret, but for a reason.
Never.
And it's very limited. It's only.
At some point, you probably said worry about it. Like when you approve the purchase and sale agreement for the property that was negotiated. That's your reporting out. Here's the purchase and sale agreement for the property that we negotiated. Because you have the address or the agent on the agenda. Now you have the purchase and sale agreement. So there's very okay. And then remedies. So if you violate the Brown Act, we may have to go back and undo everything that we did. And if in court, the court's going to say, oh, we're going to start recording your closed sessions now. And the court, the judge is going to listen to those sessions. The others have to get an award of attorney's fees. So you're not only paying for the city attorney, now you're going to pay for their attorney. And in some circumstances, you get a fee award. Costly, not all of those.
So what are the ramifications for the person who violated the
You can get the charge.
So
And not only that, there's, this council has a code of conduct, and you can hold each other accountable. So ways to hold each other accountable are through reprimands for one written, through removal from committees, through senator. Okay. Anything, I know it's a lot of information. I probably have to, take up the night here.
No.
Good.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna give it the first, sure, okay. So we're gonna change gears just a little bit. I'm going to talk briefly about conflicts of interest. And so as Mary mentioned at the beginning, you're required to have biennials, so every other year training on ethics, a 2-hour training and very specific. Like it's supposed to include a very specific topic. And that's not what today is. This is just meant to supplement that, not be a substitute for that. And when you do have a full council, it's going to be like culture. But I do want to talk a little bit about this. So that's okay, I'll read it. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about, in particular, there's lots of information that we can talk about with ethics and conflicts of interest, but today we're really just going to focus on personal financial conflicts of interest. That's governed by the California Political Reform Act. And what it says specifically is that public officials, whether you're elected or appointed, should perform their duties in an impartial manner, free from bias, caused by their own financial interests or the financial interests of the person who reported them. So all of you here, either appointed planning commissioners or elected city council people, are subject to the Political Reform Act. And as I mentioned, this all here relates to financial interest. So the general rule is that you may not make, participate in making, or use your official position to influence a governmental decision if that decision could have a reasonably foreseeable material financial effect on you, your immediate family, or any financial interest that you can have. And that's kind of a mouthful. But really what we're talking about is you have a financial interest in the decision if that decision will in some way impact you or your family's finances. So we'll get a little that into property values. It does. We'll talk a little bit about materiality. So if it's going to, earn you $1, may not matter. But there are different types of financial interests like property values, and employer, things like this that we'll talk about, and we'll talk about specifically what would be considered material application. So, I mean, the general rule is that if you're making a decision that will impact your personal finances by $500, that's the general rule, and we'll talk a little bit more about assessing the nuances to that. That's where you want to start thinking about that you can have a conflict of interest. There is a general public exception that I should mention. And that is that if the decision you're making is going to impact the public's finances in the same way that it will impact yours, then it's not a conflict. And the really classic example of that is your utility bill or your utility rates. The city council adopts increases to water and sewer rates. They have a water and sewer bill, so their bill is going to go up. So clearly that decision is going to impact them financially. But because that same impact is the entire public is subject to that same impact, it's not a conflict. I mean, and it's also a necessity in that somebody has to vote for those, and probably the entire city council or most of them have a utility bill. So here's the materiality that I was talking about. So these are different types of financial interests that you may have. So it could be a business entity that you're involved in, your own source of income, so typically your salary, but it could be other types of income that you may have. Oh, sorry. So, sorry. Okay. Well, go ahead. Some burden control. All right. So gifts, or again, it's not just your own financial interest, but those of your immediate family, or then again, like Mary mentioned, real property. So talking about real property, because I think this one probably comes up the most often, is when you're making a decision related to a development, or something else that impacts real property in the city. If your own property that you own is within 500 feet of that property about which you're making a decision, then you're presumed to have a conflict. So in most cases, in that you're going to recuse yourself from that decision. Now, there could be, if there is some clear and convincing evidence that you will have there will be absolutely no impact to your property, then you could still participate. But if you're within better probably not to. But if you're within 500 feet, the presumption is that there's a conflict. If you're between 500 and 1,000 feet, it's debatable, or it really depends on the specific circumstances. So you have to really evaluate, will this decision that I'm making, whether it's to approve a development or whatever it is related to that piece of property, will it in any way impact my property? So will it increase traffic, noise, any of these things that might impact your property value, or even just the desirability of your property? There could very well be a conflict of interest there.
So whose responsibility is it to call that out? Would you advise the council, or because I had this happen to me, but I mean, I don't know how much 500 feet is. So I think I went on Google Maps or World or whatever, and
that is tricky, actually, knowing exactly where 500
yeah.
feet is. I mean, I think if you want to know the exact distance, I would ask planning director, because we may be able to determine that. But when it comes to determining whether you have a conflict, it's up to you. Okay. And we're always happy to help you if you have, maybe you want to know, like, what are the factors that I need to consider if I'm between 500 and 1,000 feet? We can help you work through that, but ultimately I don't know where you own property. Right. So it's really up to you to determine whether or not you might have a conflict.
Yeah.
What I would say is, when in doubt, spit it out.
Yeah.
And going back to that, you can only rely on the written advice that you can't say this fully.
Mm-hmm.
That I was okay. Also, one of my communities, they actually, for each council member, have planning to draw a 500-foot circle around the property that they own, so that when an item came before you, you can look at it and say, okay, I'm not within 500 feet, I'm outside of that. So that might be a useful tool, because I need to take a football field and then some.
I know, right?
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and then if you're over 1,000 feet, you're presumed not to have a conflict, but again, if there is there's some clear impact to your property, you'll see a huge increase in value because of particular development or whatever is going in on the property. That you're going to make a decision on, I mean, you should still fit it out, although if you're over 1,000 feet away, it's presumed that there's conflict. So these are guidelines, but there's some more to consider when you're thinking about whether or not you should vote on something like this.
So what happens if we have 3 council members and 3 commissioners that all have the same conflict? How would we do?
Good question. What do you do?
What do you do? Not consider an item. There's a thing called a rule of necessity. If we need you to vote, you will be tasked with voting.
All 3?
It will be one of you to make the form, not all 3 of you. So kind of a draw scenario, right? But yeah, it will be, we implement what's called the rule of necessity because we have to vote on the item. And that's happened before what do you do? And then not only that, so I had in one city, one council member, there was a business across the street from the property they owned, a store, and he didn't want it to get a liquor license. Because kids live right on the street, right? He doesn't want liquor there, he doesn't want people hanging out there, he doesn't want the liquor license to be granted. So he conflicted out, but then he left the room altogether. And this guy was a big guy, muscular, huge guy. Could you imagine if he sat in the front row while his colleagues voted on that item? I mean, the inclination of, oh, God, okay, I'm sitting here, how am I going to vote? Yes, give him the liquor license. You have to leave the room if you don't want to influence the decision of the colleagues. Sorry.
No, I mean, that's
We are.
Of course.
So similarly with, for instance, if you have a business or you're somehow involved in a business entity and you're being tasked with making a decision that will impact that business, there is a specific dollar amount rule where if your decision will in some way provide you with $2,000 or more, that's kind of the threshold. That's where you should not make the decision if it's something more than $2,000. Again, and it's not just if you have an ownership interest, but it's also if you're a director, a partner, a public official, someone who holds a position of management in that business, then and your decision as a public official will impact you to the tune, or you or the business to the tune of $2,000 or more. You should consider it a conflict to accuse yourself.
Well, what about an after the fact financial conflict of interest where you received a campaign donation for $5,000? Should you vote on that item?
Well, there is new law related to that specifically. So if you're deciding on an entitlement or a permit or a license or something to that effect of someone from whom you received a campaign donation, you are supposed to recuse yourself if it's over $250. Or if you give the money back, so you can correct it prior to the vote. And this is a new law, so it's
New as
January.
this year?
Yeah, I believe it says January. It's like it's
About time.
Yeah, it is brand new, and it's I'm seeing a lot of political movement, right? When this law was first going to be implemented, the law tried to make it retroactive.
Ooh, that'd be a lot of trouble.
That piece didn't make it into the final legislation, but going forward, yeah, you can return the money. And there's even instances where it's very nuanced and hasn't been tested in the court yet, but the timing of returning the money. And not only that, you get $250 from the developer, $250 from the developer's wife, $250 from the developer's fund, or the $249, whatever. So you're really what you're receiving from the developer is thousands of dollars. each individual person may be 2 minutes. So they're very nuanced law, so no need to check. We get those donations.
And you can imagine a scenario where someone who knows there will be before council or the planning commission in the future wants your support, and so they do contribute to your campaign. Well, they may know they're going to be in front of you, but you may not know, so
Mhm.
it's a little bit tricky. And then I think I mentioned this, but what a source of income includes your salary. So if you are going to be making a decision that will impact the person or the business or whoever that may be that is responsible for your salary, that's also something you should consider thinking about as a potential conflict. And these rules are each of them have different thresholds, and whether it's a nonprofit. I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty details. I more just want to make you aware that these things exist, so that if you do look at the agenda and see an item coming up and you know that this is like related to your employer or some decision near a piece of rental property you have or whatever that may be, you can kind of think, oh, I need to consider whether or not I have a conflict. So if you do notice something, what do? I think the first step is the fact that you notice. That's kind of the purpose of tonight's training. So congratulations on that. Second, you just stop and confer with somebody. So you can talk to the city manager, you can talk to myself. Then I'm going to show you some online resources at the end. And Mary mentioned the FPPC. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But there's a lot of resources available and people you can talk with. And because the agenda is published in advance, and you may even have an idea of what's going to be on the agenda even further in advance, just from talking with the city manager, and you have some time to consider the things before you actually have to come forth and vote. And again, these rules are kind of complicated and nuanced, and they change frequently. Like as we talked about tonight, we talked about these brand new laws. So you're always welcome and encouraged to ask questions. So the FPPC, they administer the Political Reform Act, so they're responsible for enforcing these rules, but also they're available for consultation. So they can be called up and you can talk with them over the phone, or they can issue written advice. And as Mary mentioned, the verbal advice is fine, it's helpful, but if you ever want to rely upon the FPPC's advice to you in civil litigation or criminal prosecution, or you actually want to rely on it for your own defense, it does need to be in writing. And the FPPC though issues written opinions or written advice all the time. That's what they do largely. And if you do have a conflict and you do end up voting on an item, there are penalties, so which probably isn't a surprise, but one of those is that something that you vote on may become unenforceable. So like if you vote on a contract and the vendor is someone you have a business interest in or something like that, that conflict could lead to that contract becoming either void or unenforceable, which is really a shame for the city because they likely needed that contract to do some important business. Also, you could be yourself charged with a misdemeanor. You could incur fines anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000. It could be embarrassing. So politically, talked about social media. I'm sure if someone is opposed to your decision, they may make it public that you really shouldn't have been involved in that decision at all. And then if you are convicted, you will be banned from holding any office forever. So that's it. It's a big deal. If you're in a meeting, we talked a little bit about this as well. If you're in a meeting, you have a conflict on an item, what do? So first off, we know you don't participate in the decision. Prior to the meeting or in the meeting itself, you don't want to discuss the item with staff because you don't want to necessarily be seen as influencing their recommendation. You don't want to discuss it with your colleagues because you may be seen as influencing their decision in your favor. So basically, you don't want to participate in the vote. You also don't want to participate beforehand in discussing with staff or your colleagues. And then when you're in the meeting and the item comes up, you want to actually leave the room unless the item's on consent. If the item's on consent, you can stay. But if it's a discussion item, you're going to leave the room. And prior to leaving the room, you're going to identify to the public and your colleagues the precise nature of your conflict, the reason that you're leaving. And this happened very relatively recently with a vote based on a development where one of the council members, her property was within 500 feet, so she disclosed that, left the room, and then came back when that item was done.
But can you come back as a member of the public and speak? Can you take your planning hat off and put on your
What I would
neighbor hat?
say is that to me would kind of go to number 2, where I mean, technically you do have that freedom of speech, but it would certainly at least be perceived as attempting to influence your colleagues
Mhm.
in that decision.
I think we risk it.
Yeah.
I really do. I think we risk it. But that raises another question. So going back to our, you're sitting up here at the council of Brown, I was saying earlier. So years ago, one of your council members wanted to speak as a member of the public. You can, you wear 2 hats, right?
Mhm.
You're a member of the public and you're a council member. So she came down and spoke from here for her 3 minutes as a member of the public. But remember, you can only speak about things you have knowledge of as a member of the public, right? And she started to veer off and I'm kind of just like, she kind of got back and forth. But so that you can have those dual roles, but be really careful.
Mhm.
And I think that goes to you don't want to influence. And how do you really separate those? And then also, how do you not influence? So go back to my example with a large council member. He could speak as a member of the public, but I would recommend as soon as he's done, you leave the room still.
Mhm.
Like you can get out your, say what you need to say, and you gotta leave the room. You can't intimidate. I think it's gonna be tricky. And again, I mean, the consequence is severe. You could be forever banned from holding office.
And then last we have our resources that I mentioned, the FPPC. So that's where you can call them up, talk to them, get some verbal advice. You can also ask for written advice if you believe you have a conflict or you're not certain. And then I have 2 other resources here that just have good information. So the Institute of Local Government and then the California Attorney General actually weighs in on a lot of these issues. So they have all of their opinions on all of the different topics they opine on there, but there are quite a few opinions related to conflict of interest. So that's all I have today. Are there any additional questions about the conflict? And as I mentioned, we'll do the full-fledged 2-hour ethics training. I know it's going to be thrilling.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's actually specific topics that are required.
Yeah.
And you said you would share this PowerPoint. Yeah, I'll email it to
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd like.
Yeah, I mean, one rule I think of is when you go to like that certain conferences, how much are the gift certificates that you can win? What's the dollar value? $4,900. Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna learn all about those limits, but that's why. And then you gotta disclose on concept. So, yeah. I just remember which one of that.
But you can only win one. Right? If you get win 2, then you'll have to disclose it.
But no, I'm only one.
Yeah. Well, I can do that.
Yeah, so and we don't take you to Vegas. Is that-
She's gonna win more than $49.
Yeah.
And does anyone need any Brown Act handbook? Because Jen can bring them.
I think when you gave me mine, you said that it was like the old one, that a new one was about to come out.
Okay.
So if I could get the new one. Yeah.
We were given the new one.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, this is a resource when you're, when you show.
I think maybe go ahead and give one to all council.
Yeah, it's the one with the spiral down, where the older one was like, not spiral, but like a nice spiral. Yeah.
So, if we have a question pertains to city government authority. When we call them directly, then we have to go through our city manager, get you.
I recommend to go through this meeting.
Change the name.
Yeah, I think for the commission, now that's not to say we don't have council members to contact us directly. We do have a policy that when one council member or one commissioner asks a question and we give advice, we give it to everybody across the board. Because for us, the worst case scenario is when a council member supervises and well, the city attorney told me X, Y, and Z, and I have 4 council members looking at me like, the heck, Mary, your information is one. So, yeah, it would be better if you ran it through Paul or maybe your chair, but no, we have to go with that.
Well, I'm just talking general terms, I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm just talking general terms.
Yeah, and then who said? We have any.
Only if there's something
Yeah.
dangerous.
Okay. Yeah, you cannot call it preference, really. Yeah, because I know, he's the one that's doing people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've actually had to do that. Because I wanted to meet with 2 council members. And I asked Paul if that was a conflict and then we talked to Travis and Travis said it was fine for 2 council members and 2 planning people to meet.
Right,
But we didn't do it until we got the green light.
yeah, but you wouldn't call for that,
Mhm.
probably the best way to do it, see when the ultimate gets the bill and then work on the council,
Mhm.
council's employee, and so. It's part of client management as well. And we recognize that we're doing sometimes, and so we try to do our best to.
I'm sure I heard exactly what you said. You said that you met 2 city council people and then yourself, and that's not considered,
No.
they're 2 different things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was, we did say it at the next meeting.
Yeah, and we announced it. We reported it out at our meeting.
Yeah, and there's some, that. I've been doing this for so many years, and yet I still come across
Thanks.
new situations, new scenarios, and so it's a continuous learning process, so. yeah, it's a lot of information.
Any other questions or comments?
For me.
All right, thank you very much.
Good to see you, Mary.
Good to see you too.
Do you miss us?